We're super excited. We are going to be talking today and following up on the series that we just completed, which is called Entrusted. And so PV talked all throughout this series about what it means that God entrusted everything to us. That as we think about what we have, everything that we have, the resources that we have, the time that we have, all of that was given to us by God, but it was given to us for a purpose, that we should use it the way that He has called us to use it. If you think about even in Genesis chapter 1, when God creates everything and He creates humanity, then He gives them a charge. And He says, okay, so now that I've created you in my image, you should be fruitful and multiply. You should fill the earth and rule over it. And so God has given us this world, but not just for us to do whatever we want with, but for us to lead and rule it in the way that God has commanded and designed. And that's true not just of like the overall humanity, but for each of us individually, that God has given you the resources that you have, the things that you have, the relationships that you have, all of that for a purpose. And so we talked a lot in this series about the parable of the talents. And so this is a story that Jesus told about a master who went away on a trip, and as he was going away on the trip, he left some of his servants in charge of his things. And so he gave each of them a certain amount of money, 3 different amounts, and he said, here's my stuff. I am entrusting it to you that you will use it well for when I return. And so 2 of the servants, the one who was given 5 bags and the ones who were given 10 bags of money, that they were able to make a return on that, and they were to provide 5 bags back and 10 bags back. But the 3rd servant, who was only given 1 bag, just dug a hole and buried his and didn't do anything with it. And when God came back, he said, or when the master, who is God, when he came back, he said to him that he should have taken care of it better, that he should have handled it better, that he should have used it better. And so in the same way, God has entrusted each of us with things in our lives so that we can use them for His sake. And so that's kind of like the overview of what this series has been about. We talked about each week was a little bit different. So the first week, PV talked about the concept of not mine, all His. That everything in the world is God's. He created all of it from the biggest star in the galaxy to the smallest molecule on Earth. God has created everything, and so everything is His. The next week, he talked about quality over quantity. That it's not necessarily about the number, right? Each of the servants were given a different number, but it's about the quality. It's about how we use it. And that kind of leads into the next week, which is about making it count, about how we use what God has given us. And then the last couple weeks, we talked about practically just like, what does that look like? How do we live that out in 4 major areas with our relationships, with our time, with our money, and with our talent, and with our gifts. So that's kind of a overview. If you missed some of the series, or if you've forgotten, that's kind of where we've been. If you weren't able to see those, they're all online. You can go back and watch them. They're really great. I would encourage you to do that. So as we begin, I'd like to just introduce our panel here. So if you guys would say maybe just your name, if you serve anywhere, and how long you've been at Cross Church. You want to start, Trina?
All right, I'll go. My name is Trina Litwin. I've been at Cross Church for, how long has it been now? Year?
I think so, something like that. Yeah.
And I serve in Cross Kids with the toddlers.
Great.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Dorsey, and I am one of the leaders in Cross Kids, one of the best ministries here at Cross Church. And I've been here for the whole 8 years.
Hello, I'm Crystal Gowling. I'm a little biased. I think Verge Teens is the best ministry here. I serve with the Verge middle and high schoolers. And I've been here for about 1.5 years.
Hey, good morning. My name is Sean Moore, and I've been around Cross for about 1.5 years and been on part-time staff for about 4 months. And I am honored to be the serve pastor here.
Yeah, amen. Well, thank you guys for all that you do to serve all of our ministries, which are all the best, and we really appreciate you guys being here today. One thing that I forgot to mention, one of the best things about a deep dive, in my opinion, is that we get to hear from you guys. So as we've been thinking about this series and the different things that you have been encountering and maybe the questions that you have. And so I have some questions prepared for us this morning, but those, in my opinion, are really backup. We want to hear from you guys. And so if you have a question about anything that we've talked about in the Entrusted series, anything that comes up this morning, you can text that in. And so the number, which I think should be up on the screen, is 940 208-1553. So if you have a question, we would love to answer that. And so you can text a question in to that number. And Carly, I need my phone, thank you, or I'm not going to be able to read them. Appreciate it. So as you guys are doing that, just to kind of get us started, I'd love to hear from each of you what maybe was the week or concept that stood out to you the most throughout the series and why?
You want to go?
Sure, I'll go. So the week that I think stuck with me the most was the quality over quantity, and kind of talking about the parable. I think often the focus is on, because most of us struggle with money, and it's often more of like, hey, the servant that got the one is wondering, like, why didn't I get the 5? I think the way that God was working in me at the time is kind of the opposite, where God's trying to give me 5, and I'm like, no, I just want the 1. I can't handle. I don't want to be on the hook for returning 5. And I was struggling to make a decision. Like, I had to make a decision the next day about something where God had was challenging me through work to take on some more responsibility, and I think I have a real fear and the challenge of I can't live up to the expectations. And so I think God is trying to speak to me through that time of, it's not just about what I'm asking you to give, it's that I will provide what you need to give.
That's good.
I think I struggle with, it's like I'm gonna buckle under pressure. I can't deal with the stress. I don't have the time or the talents, and I think that the message of God gives what you can handle and what you've been faithful in. So it's like, okay, people are asking me to do this. God's asking me to do this. He must trust, and he's entrusting it to me. So he's going to provide the means for me to do it. I think that's why it hit me, because it was just in the middle of that decision. So
That's good. That's good.
For me, it was week 3, the idea of make it count. And for me, the idea that stuck out was that we would live intentionally, that we would take our life and live on purpose. I think too often we get so distracted with the busy and the things that we have to do that we miss the opportunities that the Lord is putting in front of us and around us. And so that we would slow down and realize that because the Lord has given us all these time, talents, and treasures, that we are to look for opportunities to leverage those things for the kingdom.
For me, it was Living It Out, part 2, the whole thing on serving. I was wondering why I was picked for this panel. As you guys know, I have been, serving in Cross Kids, like I said, from the beginning. And for me, it is what God wanted me to do. I mean, I am so involved over there, so connected to those kids. It's all about what can we do to serve others, serve the kids, give my time out there to them just for the glory of God. And so I think that was a big reinforcement for me, because there are times when I'm like, okay, I think I'm done. But I still am in there because I know this is what I'm supposed to do. I am supposed to keep serving. I am very dedicated, and being faithful to it. So I think for me, it was still about what are those steps and what do you do? And it is to serve and serve with a joyful heart.
Yeah, that's good.
The week that stood out to me was the quality over quantity. Just knowing that God gives me what I can handle. And me being a young adult, I always want more. I'm looking at other people that have more, and just realizing like maybe right now is not the time for more. God's preparing me to get more, but for right now, I need to make the most out of what I have and make sure what I'm producing is of good quality. So.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you guys. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it, particularly in that one, is about comparison, right? Like I think when we think about what has God entrusted to me, well, why hasn't he entrusted me with more than that person? Or why does he expect more of me than that person? And so it's like a lot of looking out at other people instead of just focusing on God and our relationship with God and what he's called us to do. So that's good. We already got some great questions coming in. So the first one is, what does grace look like in your everyday lives? So you think about God's grace in your life, how does that look?
I have an answer for that.
All right.
For those who may not know, I just started a physical therapy school about a month and a half ago or so. And it's something I've been praying for and wanting for years, and it finally happened. And now that I'm in school, I'm like taking these tests, and there are days where I feel like, okay, I just don't want to go to school. I don't want to do this right now. I know I asked for this. This is really what I wanted. And then there are days where I'm just like, I did terrible on that. And people have just told me, just give yourself grace. Like, it's okay. You can forgive yourself. You can mess up. God doesn't expect perfection, but he expects me to try my best and to do the best. So if I'm doing the best I can, that's all I can give, then that's good enough. So yeah, I just need to be graceful for myself every day when it comes to school, because it's hard, and it's okay if I mess up and if I fail. But then I learn from that and build off of that, and it makes me better in the long run. So yeah.
That's good.
Well, I don't think for me it's about grace on me. It's giving grace to others. Because I think in my job, I am dealing with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities, and, things are said, things are done. And so I think I'm just like, okay, I'm going to give them grace. I know that maybe what they're saying and how they're saying is not what they really meant to be. And so I just take that upon myself to say, okay, this is a good thing. I'm just going to be quiet about it. So I am more so every day giving, I think, others grace.
Amen. And sometimes I need grace in order to give other people grace. Yeah, that's good. Any other thoughts on that one? All right. So the next question is, this one also came in from text, so these are great if you guys have more of these. It said, we talked about feeling as though God hasn't entrusted us with enough, or feeling like we should be trusted with more. How do we navigate the seasons of life when it feels like God has entrusted us with more than we feel like we can handle?
So I'm going to lean towards the front side of that question. I think too often go to the parable of the talents that we view the person that received the one bag in the negative light. And I think that we reflect that in our own lives when we see maybe the one bag that we have as a burden, or God's mad at us, rather than seeing that we still got one bag. And trying to live with a sense of gratitude and saying, okay, Lord, I know they got 5 and they got 2 and their social media is vacation here and this and that. And God's going, I still gave you one bag, And so how do we take that one bag, regardless of what everybody's doing around us, and say, okay, God, you gave me this one. How do I use it? And trying to find opportunities to take that one bag and leverage that.
Yeah, I'll answer on the flip side. I think when we feel like we've been given too much, I think for me, it's like getting myself out of the way, like stop thinking about myself in this, and that it's, and kind of what Crystal said, is like God doesn't expect perfection, and that it's just about the effort of saying like, okay, I'm going to take what you gave, whatever it is, it feels like too much, but I'm just going to do what I can and not worry about being perfect. That's hard. I haven't really learned that lesson, but it's, I think, and also just being grateful, reminding myself that, okay, God's got the outcome. The outcome is not mine to determine, but that God will handle that. I just have to try to like be faithful step by step, look at the next point, say, okay, I'm gonna just do this, just do this, just do this. And I think also just lean on people around you. It's like when you feel overwhelmed. I remember there was a season of life where it was really, really difficult, and I had a group of friends that were really close, and I would always say that they had faith in my stead. Like I didn't have faith at that time, I didn't have hope, but they could have it on my behalf. And so I think even when you feel overwhelmed, like there's too much for me, other people got my back, So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was really moved by that song that we sang that said, I'm not enough unless you come. And I feel like that, for me, like that is something that I struggle with on a recurring basis, is like, well, if I was just better, right? Like if I was a better dad or a better pastor or a better whatever, if I was just a better person, then like I would be where I want to be. And I feel frustrated because I keep falling short of that idea of who I want to be. But like you're saying, and like I think that song says, it's not about what I bring to the table. It's about what God brings to the table. And he is enough. I am not enough, but he is. And so whatever that is, like if you're like the question, if you feel like you can't handle it, the truth is, to some extent, you can, but you can with God, right? Like, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And so whatever you are experiencing that you're not sure that you can handle it if you have God with you. So, yeah, that's good. Thank you, guys. Okay, a couple more questions. Has there been an instance in the last year that was scary, but in hindsight, it caused you to grow closer to the Lord? Something you went through that was scary, but that brought you closer to God?
Well, I guess a little bit. It's always scary when you do decide to take another position, at your job. And so over the last year, I did get promoted to another job. So that was really scary because you're thinking, is this the right thing? And now I do kind of still wonder, was this the right thing? But it was still, great in terms of the whole promotion thing. But it's scary to make moves because you're coming out of your comfort zone. It's a difference. I've been with my company for a long time. And I've been kind of doing the same thing forever. And so this was something that was, new for me and scary. And again, it's knowing that God got me there, and that's where I'm supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of still working out like it should. But it is, in general, just really scary to think about, okay, do I take this move? Do I do it? And then what's going to happen and how is it going to look? Mm-hmm. And then am I going to be great at it? Am I going to perform like I'm supposed to? And so I think just still keeping God top of mind, it is keeping me where I need to be in terms of focus in that position. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So last year, last January, I moved out here to Texas by myself. My mom came and helped me, but I moved here by myself from Virginia, not having any family or friends out here, just in the hopes that I could go to school. The school I wanted to go to was here in Fort Worth. So just taking that leap of faith was terrifying. I got here, I'm like, okay. I had this plan in my head. It's all gonna work out how I think. And I reapplied to school. I was waitlisted. So again, I was like, was this what I was supposed to do? Should I have stayed home? I don't have a support system, honestly. Besides my church, I don't have too many friends outside the church. I don't love my job that I was doing. Is this where I should be? Just questioning that, and it's all just about having faith and trusting God that, again, things are working according to His plan, and we might not see the outcome of it right now, and I'm just so thankful I did take that leap of faith to do that, because here I am in the school I want to go to, top choice. It's hard, but I still love it. I love my classmates and all, and I'm just still working towards my goal of what I want to do in life. And I wouldn't be here unless I took that leap of faith and dive into some scary waters. But at the end of the day, it won't be scary because God's with me, and we just have to remember that at the end, He does not give us a spirit of fear. So trying to just take those negative thoughts out of your head and remind yourself that this is what God had planned for me. So
that's good. Yeah. We got a comment which was for the last question, but I think kind of applies to this too. When we feel like God gives us more than we can handle, we have the comfort of knowing that God has already won that battle and every battle after that. So showing His obedience as quick as possible is key for me. So yeah, I think that's good. We can remember that God has already won, right? That's honestly the truth of the resurrection. That God has already defeated the hardest battle that has ever been won, which was his death in Jesus. And so if He can overcome that, He can overcome anything in my life. So that's good. Okay, I have another question. What would you say to someone who is in a season of not having enough money for day-to-day needs? So as we think about specifically maybe the entrusted part with not having enough money, with the money piece, and someone who feels like they don't have enough.
First, I think we want to make sure that we have community, right? Is there resources, family, friends that are right next to you that you can lean on during times like this? Second thing, there are a million resources here in Denton. And so I know sometimes that we can be prideful and say, I don't want to ask for help, or I don't want to go there and do this or that. And so would you be willing to say, hey, I need some help? Matter of fact, we have a piece of paper at our desk full of 20 resources just here in Denton. And so if people find themselves in need, reach out, ask. If it's not something that we can do, we want to point you to somebody with the other resources here in this community. Yeah. The other thing too is, are there things in your life that might be causing you this issue? Budgeting problems, oh no, I don't, I'm following my budget, and then you look and you're like, well, I spent, $400 every weekend at Target. Yeah. It's, there might be some issues. So are we taking a realistic look at our life and saying, like, hey, this is causing me issues, and I need to figure out how I can carve this out?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most will always say, oh, pray about it. Like, I prayed about it. I still don't have any money. But I think, to your point, I think there are different things and different ways that people can look at it in terms of what is a need, per se, in terms of what's been the want. So maybe they are spending a lot of time on a lot of the things that they wanted and not necessarily what they need, because I feel that when different things arrive, you just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for this? But I think in terms of, my faithfulness in terms of always giving, it's amazing how things just happen and you just get this extra money and it's there because of your faithfulness in terms of, giving back and giving to God and, and giving to the church. So, it's easier said than done. But I do think that if you do stay, faithful, if you do give your time, and God knows that that's where your heart is, that He will find a way for you. He will be able to provide in terms of what you need. So it's a combination.
Yeah, He does provide. And I think, even like as I think about my life and my family, we have really sought to serve God and made some decisions that have made things tight in other ways in our lives, and that is has been difficult and frustrating sometimes. But one of the blessings that I've seen through that is that God does provide, and that sometimes it feels like the widow in Zarephath, where it's like I went back and there was enough, and then I thought it was gone, and then I went back and there was enough, and I, sometimes you wish it wasn't like that. But that's, I think, an example of how God does always come through. Even if it's not when I want, even if it's not how much I want, even if it's not the level of security that I want, I can just testify that God has come through. And so I think that He provides. Okay, I have a few more questions here. Okay, so these are kind of related. So sometimes I get afraid because I feel alone and I feel like God doesn't hear me. Do you ever have a moment where you feel the same way? And then kind of a follow-up, do you feel like God answers your prayers and hears you?
I'm going to go to the second part of that. So I've dealt with some situations in my life, and as I look back and I'd be like, man, I prayed for this, Lord, I prayed for this, I prayed for this. For one particular, it was praying for healing, and healing came in death, but the answer to prayer was how I dealt with that. And so it wasn't the outcome that I expected, but it's the outcome that I needed. And so would we view our prayers that we offer more open-handed and in a God-sized vision, and not just say, looking for black and white answers?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of times in my life where I felt like God's never heard me, or I'm just praying and I'm asking these questions and I don't hear anything back. And one day I remember, before I moved out here, I was just contemplating on what I should do with my life, my career. And someone I was working with in a clinic, a patient, we just had a regular conversation, and she kind of said something to me that confirmed what I was supposed to be doing or what I wanted to do, and answered my question. So looking back on that, it was God that was speaking to me through other people. So it may not, because I always thought I was going to hear God in this loud, audible voice one day driving in my car. He's going to be like, Crystal, go. Crystal, yes. And that's not exactly how it came. But just over time, just learning, through the conversations I have with other believers and things that I'm reading and hearing, God is constantly speaking to us. We just need to be able to tune down the worldly noise in our lives and just truly just focus on Him, and then you'll know what He's saying.
Amen. This is a good one. I like this one. So what would you like God to entrust you with, and how are you preparing to be entrusted with it?
$1 million.
$1 million.
I would say, I think just entrusting me with, more patience, more faithfulness, just because of all the, day-to-day things in the world. It's because I'm not going to say, more money or anything like that, because I feel like it's so much more than money. Because a lot of times, again, as we've been saying, that when people see people with all of this, like, give me more, then believe me, God, if you give me this, I'm gonna give it back to the church, right? I would give my 10%. But it's not necessarily that. I think it's more so like there's things that I just like to have peace, like just knowing that even though you may not have the most money or the most things, but knowing that your life is peaceful, that, that you're in a good place. Because, these people out here with a lot of money, a lot of them are miserable, so they got all this money, but they're not living a great life, like they got so many other conflicts and things they're dealing with, and you don't want that. You just say, okay, you give me what I need at this time. That's what I need, and that's what I'm going to give back. But knowing that I have peace, I'm in a good place, and I have a good heart. I could just live a good life, that's just like, hey, it's a regular little life. So I just think it's just more of that faithfulness and patience and, and just understanding of, where I am and where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'll say really quickly. I think what I would want God to entrust me more with is energy. I was telling somebody this earlier. It's like I'm a very low energy person. But when I think about the flip side of that, like what am I doing to prepare to be entrusted with that? Like what would I do with that extra energy or the extra time? Right now it's like my evenings are booked up with meetings. It's like, what would I do if I didn't have that? Realistically, at this point, I'd probably sit around and watch Netflix or, something that is not worthy of that time. And I think there's maybe a reason that God's not entrusting that to me yet. So, yeah, I think if I truly desire that, then I like the question because it's a challenge, that I need to be preparing myself to take that on and be ready to serve with that and not just be thinking about myself.
Yeah, that's good. I liked it too because of that same reason, that it's pushing us to think about, how am I preparing for what I want? That I can ask God all day, give me this, give me this, give me this, but how am I preparing to receive that and to receive it well and use it? So, okay, next question. How do you know when to trust the path that God is providing instead of going on your own?
Read that one again.
How do you know when to trust the path that God is providing instead of going on your own?
Baby steps.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is sometimes I feel like the Lord gives us opportunities or gives us a passion or a vision or something like that, and we want to eat the whole elephant right now, right? And rather than taking just practical steps of Lord, I don't know what's way out there. I know you've given me this opportunity or passion or whatever. And so rather than focusing on the end game, even though we feel like that what the Lord might have been given to us, let's just take it piece by piece, because that's what we can handle at the time. And that also allows us to engage and hear from the Lord as we progress through it. It's kind of like that idea of the Lord's not going to give me $10 million because I'm not ready for $10 million, right? But I have $100 right now. And so what can I do with that?
Yeah.
I think I heard somebody say over here, it's like, oh, you can always trust God, which is true. But I think sometimes we want to see the way of the whole path, kind of like what you were saying. And I think that's not what we're asked to do. It's to, take those little steps. And I think I don't know the end goal of what God has for me to do in life, other than the obvious big picture stuff, but the practical steps. But I know that if I take steps in faith and it's the wrong direction, that he's going to guide me back to the right path. So it's I might go off trail for a little bit, but he'll bring me back. And I think it's having that trust that my mistakes are not going to undo what God wants to do. So,
Yeah.
And I think with that too, as we have the end in mind, if we knew all the bumps and speed bumps and traps and falls that might occur along the way, we might not even take that first step.
Yeah, that's right. We had a comment from a verse from Psalm 119:68 says of God, "You are good and you do good." When we doubt God or when our circumstances are scary, we can remember who he is and what he does. His character never changes, and his character dictates his actions. So yeah, I mean, I think kind of even like going along with that, like we can trust God because he is good, and we always want to trust him and follow his path. I think maybe the challenge is determining, like, is this, often for me, I'm faced with a decision, is this God or is this just what I want to do? And so trying to, I think you said, like, God will guide you back. If we're in step with the Spirit and trusting and in the Word and in prayer, that God will guide us and we can trust the Spirit to do that. Okay, so how can you make sure that you did all you could do to make it count? So we talked one week about making it count. So how can you be sure that you did everything that you could to make it count with what God has entrusted you with?
Were you obedient?
Yeah. Obedience.
Did you basically put in all the effort that you had towards it? Did you just give half? You knew you had more energy and effort to give. Did you give the full amount or not?
Yeah. That's good.
I just think that, everything that you do have, and are you using it to the fullest ability, So are you making it count every day that if you are having the ability to, to serve, to give, are you doing that? Are you making a difference? And does it count day to day? So.
Yeah, that's good.
I just want to add one more
Yeah.
quick thing to that. I think going back to, the first question that came in about grace, I think remembering that too. It's like if you're constantly looking back, like, did I do enough? Did I know enough? That's not always helpful. I think in the moment, yes, be obedient for that, but don't look back because God's grace has got you. I can second guess myself to the end of days and think like what I didn't do right instead of focusing on the things that I did do right. And so I think resting in God's grace in that too.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We got time for a couple more questions, so if you guys have some, you can continue to send them in. I have another response. This is about the question about feeling like you don't have enough. In 2 Kings 4, the lady who cried out to Elisha only had a little oil. Elisha asked her to go and ask for empty jars and to pour the oil she had into them. She obeyed. After filling all the jars, she still had oil left over. She was able to sell the oil to pay her debts. So what is your little oil? Identify it and seek ways to multiply it. So yeah, I think same thing even with Jesus and the loaves and the fish, that God multiplies what we have. And so whatever we feel like isn't enough, God has more than enough for us. So as we're kind of getting to our last few questions, just as you guys think maybe particularly about the concept of like all things, like everything being entrusted to you, not just some things, what does kind of that mean to you about all things being entrusted in your life, not just some?
I think that means that everything in my life, to my car, the education I have, the relationships I have, they're ultimately God's. So if things aren't working the way I want them to work, I need to give it to God. If I'm struggling in a certain area, just give it to God because, again, it's not mine, it's His. So just remembering that in every aspect of our life, from school, job, everything, it's God's. So give it back to Him.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say that reminds me of like the being a renter versus being a homeowner.
Yeah.
It's like you can call on the landlord to fix stuff for you.
Yeah.
It's not on
good.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I and my family would definitely agree with this. I have the tendency to mine. I'm very much a miner. Like, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Don't touch it. We're, protecting it. And so for me to take a step back and go, okay, the Lord gave me this to use this for His kingdom, His purpose, and so to live more open-handed, generous, sharing, graceful, but then also to realize that what we've been given is a great responsibility, and that we would see that as an honor and not a burden.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I have to catch myself some days where I'm like, oh my gosh, do I still want to work? Do I need this job? And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of people who don't have a job. And I should be very thankful that He has entrusted me to have this job because, it can go away. And so same thing when you look around in your home and you're like, oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had some new furniture, I wish I, and it's like, hey, you have a house and you're living in the house, and you still have your electricity. So I think it's like God's entrusted me to have the things that I have that I'm so thankful for. And so you just taking all that and knowing that I have it because he gave it to me, and then I'm going to do everything that I can, to give back. So.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this will be our last question. Just what are some creative ways that you've found to use your life to make a difference? So the things that you've been entrusted with, what's maybe a creative way that you've found to make a difference?
I don't know if this is creative or not, but basically once I started school, something I just wanted to do was like have a little pre-test prayer devotional session. I just let my class know if anyone wants to join me, come join me. I'm just going to pray over our tests and things like that. And that evolved into like a small Bible study group we actually have going on now. So just, that's not creative, really.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it is, yeah.
I don't know. I just wanted to take my faith and put it into like just little aspects of my life. So it was just a test I had for my class, but me wanting to pray for people beforehand turned into more. So,
One thing our family used to do, and we've been challenged to maybe bring this back, is we used to try to have an open door policy one day a week at our house. And so we live in a town with lots of young adults, and so we say, hey, Thursday nights, food's on the table, come and go. And if something's going on, we're being intentional to say, hey, would you guys come over on Thursday night? And then that way we're leveraging our home, our table, the food that we've been provided to leverage community and grow in that and engage in people's lives.
Yeah, that's good.
Is it this Thursday?
That was last week, you missed it.
Yeah. Well, that's good, and I think kind of to both of those points, it doesn't have to be big or grand, or you don't have to add something new to your life. You can use like that's really the whole idea here. You're using what God has already given to us, right? So I don't have to manufacture whatever to provide to someone else or bless someone else, but I'm just blessing other people with what I've already been blessed with. And so I have an opportunity to do that. And one of the things too, like if you're like looking for ways to do that, we're trying to figure that out. One of the things we're trying to do as a church right now is to really help people learn their gifts and how God has already gifted them and how they can go out and serve other people through their gifts. And so we've been sending out this Engage survey the last couple weeks, so you may have seen that in the text. You can find Sean if you haven't, and it's in the app
Right
as
here at
well.
the top of the
Thank
app.
you. So if you download the app, it's right at the top. So you can fill that out and learn more about like what has God gifted me with? What do I have that he's provided in my life? And then how can I use that for others? And kind of the second part of that too is next Sunday, we're doing this brand new thing called the Engage class, which is going to be an opportunity to kind of talk through that. And so say like, okay, God has gifted me this way, so then how can I use that and how can I serve the kingdom in that and get engaged in doing that? And so that's going to be next Sunday morning at 9:30, and everybody is invited. So we're going to pack out the room and have a great time doing that. So any closing comments from you guys on what it means to be entrusted or anything?
I just want to hit the Engage survey one more time. So
Yeah.
I want you guys to view the Engage survey in two ways. One, it's a self-inventory. We want to give you guys a tool to say, maybe for some of you it's a reminder to be like, man, you're always looking at other people, but to look at myself and be like, man, look what the Lord's done in me. And then the second part of that is that we as the church staff and leaders, we get to see who's here. Who's in our church community, and what are the gifts, talents, and treasures that you've been given, so that we can find ways to work together to benefit the kingdom.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Well, would you guys give our panelists a round of applause? Thank you, guys. You can have a seat. We have picture chairs. And our band can go ahead and come back up. So I love doing Deep Dive. It's a really great opportunity because we get all of these amazing messages from PV where he's teaching Scripture and applying it to our lives and doing all this stuff. But each of us has a different perspective. And so I love hearing from different people about the things that are going on in their lives, how they're trying to apply the messages and things like that. And so it's just wonderful to hear from each of them. As we continue in our service today, we're going to have an opportunity to respond to God in worship. And one of the things that, as we think about this whole series, is that God has entrusted us with all of this stuff. But it's not just like this thing and this thing and this thing, but it's our whole lives. That your life is a gift from God. That every breath that you take is a gift from God. Your salvation is a gift from God. That all that we have is a gift from God. And all of that is true because of who God is and what God has done in the world. That he created the world and everything in it. And that even though we rejected him and even though we fall into sin and fail and are not enough, that he chose to love us anyway and to save us from our sin in Jesus. And so the truth is that everything that we have is God's, and it is a gift from him, and that all that we do is respond to him. And so we're going to stand, and we're going to worship God and respond to him today. And so if you are feeling led by God to give your life to maybe to him for the first time, to follow him in salvation, to begin a relationship with him, if you are being led to give your life in service to other people, then we want to pray through those decisions with you. And so we're going to have our prayer team up here at the front. If you just want time to pray and to connect with God and to thank God for what he's done, you can come pray through that or kneel here at the altar. But we're going to sing and we're going to respond in worship. And we invite you to take a step of response and to come and to give your life back to God.